Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a book review. I've not done a standalone book review in quite a while, but I feel like I want to maybe get back into doing them, doing slightly more in-depth focused reviews. So the book I've got today to show you is Yours Cheerfully by AJ Pearce. And when I purchased this, I did not realise that it was the second book in the series. I was purely drawn in by the beautiful cover, the beautiful sprayed edges, and the fact that it is a signed copy. So I did get this in one of our local Waterstones, and inside somewhere it does have signature. There we go. But yes, it wasn't until I think went to go to my Goodreads to mark it that I was starting to read it that I realised it was actually the second book in the series. The first book is called Dear Mrs. Bird, and this is part of the Emmy Lake Chronicles, and I think so far there are 3 books in this series, I guess. But I had read sort of the first chapter and I felt pretty confident in the fact that I could probably try and read this as possibly a standalone book, and that's what I did. So yes, I would definitely say you could read this as the first book or as a standalone. I do want to go and read the first and the third book, but reading this first, I don't feel like I've missed any important, I mean I might have, but I don't feel like I've missed certain details about characters. I felt like I really got to know the characters quite easily. I didn't feel like I was behind on things because I was reading this one first and hadn't read the first book. So this is set in 1940s wartime Britain, and it follows our main character Emmy, or Emmeline, her name is Emmeline Lake, and she works for the Woman's Friend magazine. She works there, and then she also volunteers as part, I think, of the local sort of fire brigade team. So she does that hand in hand, but this mainly focuses on her time as being a writer, and basically the magazine she works for has been asked by sort of the Ministry of Defence, the Ministry of Information actually, to go to this meeting where they basically tell all these magazines they need to help with the effort and the war front effort and encourage women to sign up to work in the factories and sign up and be part of the war. So Emmy actually works for her brother-in-law. Her boyfriend is working somewhere in the UK, I believe, but within, the armed forces. She also has a brother who I believe is in the RAF, and he's I don't think he's stationed overseas. They didn't really explore that too much. But so she's got these 2 very important people in her life away at war, and she is working at this newspaper, and she helps to write the articles, sort of like the agony on articles, I guess. People send their letters in, and her and another colleague help to write and respond back to these ladies with their problems, hence Yours Cheerfully. And so Emmy is given this task by her boss, her brother-in-law, to sort of be the head front for this article on getting women encouraged into joining the war. And when she's on a train with her best friend, she meets this lady, this mother, and she sees how she's struggling with her kids, and finds out that she's working in a munitions factory and wants to interview her and her friends at the factory, and she thinks that would be a really good idea for a story and an article in the magazine. And so it follows Emmy as she's setting out this sort of new adventure, this new article, and she quickly learns the struggles that all these women are facing. A lot of the mothers there are struggling to find childcare for their kids, and with the added worry of husbands being at war and dying, or being told that they're sort of lost, as it were. And so this article takes on a new turn in helping these women to get sort of the facilities they need to help provide as best as they can for the war effort, but they need the support with the childcare and such. I really enjoyed this book. I thought the writing was really easy to read. I really did fly through it once I'd sort of gotten into it. The characters were really sort of quite light. There was nothing too serious in a way. Obviously the war is quite a serious topic, but it didn't feel too heavy, and it just felt like they had really taken on the subjects and done them really tastefully, and like I said, didn't feel too heavy, even though some aspects of the book, you know, reflected quite dark aspects of what happened during the war. And I really liked the relationship that Emmy had with her and her friend Bunty. I thought Bunty was a really interesting character, and I would be interested to go back now and read the first book and see if we find out a bit more about Bunty and her backstory, because I felt like she was only touched on slightly in this book, and I think there's a lot that sort of had happened there. So yeah, it would be interesting to go back and see if they had explored that more. Also, there is obviously a little bit of romance between Emmy and her boyfriend Charles, who is away. She doesn't have quite the same fear as other girlfriends and wives because he's not overseas, but obviously you know, she's doing long distance with him, and that obviously comes with its struggles. But yeah, there's some lovely little romance bits in this that sort of progress as it goes on, and I'm not usually one for romance in a book. As long as it's not the main focus, like, I can sort of get behind a bit of romance. And I really enjoyed sort of overall reading about the women's effort during the war. I feel like it's not something I've read too much about. Obviously I studied World War I and World War II at school, so I know very much about the suffragettes and, you know, sort of the land army and that side of things, but I've never really read, I mean, this is fiction, but I've never read any non-fictional accounts from women that went to sort of munitions factory or in the land army, and I think that would be really interesting for me to explore, because a lot of the history I've read with World War II is very much sort of out in Europe at the concentration camps and that side of it. So bringing it back to home into England would be interesting to read, especially considering, you know, my grandparents experienced the tail end of the war, to sort of see what effects it had on their lives. It's also had a little bit of wit and humour marked in through it, though Emmy does have a bit of a feisty character when she wants to. She can definitely stand up for herself, which I thought I enjoyed reading, and there was a little bit of humour. There was sort of one bit where Charles comes back and he's sort of bumped in, I guess, to the local, this local gentleman on his walk, and he goes, "Oh, Emmy, so-and-so had a message for me." He says, for instance, I can't remember her name, but like, "Patricia's passed away." And you're like, oh, that's quite sad, you know, that must be his wife. And then he goes on to say, oh yeah, and he'll be bringing around some sausages next week. And it turns out that Patricia was a pig, and he was the butcher, and he said, you know, this is what she would have wanted to be made into sausages. So there was some humour in it, which I enjoyed, and yeah, the characters were all just really quite nice and warm too. There was a bit where her brother comes home and he's brought back an old parachute that ended up not being used in the war, and Emmy and Bunty are able to make this into a beautiful dress. And so it touched on that and sort of the rationing side of the war. So if you are looking for more of a lighter 1940s, 1950s book, then I would definitely recommend this. And like I said, I don't think you have to read this second in the line. I read it, and I think, you know, this also doesn't leave you on a cliffhanger. You could certainly read this as a standalone if you didn't want to read either the first or the third, but I will do, because I like the characters. I would like to see them more fleshed out, and obviously read the third book, see what happens next. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this little book review of Yours Cheerfully. Let me know if you think it might be something that you picked up, or if you've read the first book. Was I right? Could you read that as sort of a prequel? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any more of my book reviews and other content I make, and I will see you very soon. Bye guys.